Josh Neighbors College Countdown. Today it is the 10th of September, 2025. On the show today, some quick thoughts about Michigan and then also private equity involved in college sports, specifically college football, we assume, as Utah and a private equity firm out of New York, Otro Capital, are going to be involved. At Josh Neighbors _ on Twitter, or at 365 Sports College Countdown. He is at Jack Allen TV. When we do get a hold of him, he'll be on the show hopefully later on in the week. Like the video, sub to the channel. We're over 500. Shout out to the K-State fans out there after the Chris Kleiman retiring, Colin Klein taking the job video. Y'all were awesome. So a couple thoughts just out of the gate here. I waited to record today, or had to wait to record because of some tech stuff, and ended up walking into the Sherrone Moore fired at Michigan deal for an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. Just some thoughts on that really fast. Is that there's not a whole lot to say about the actual situation itself besides what will be reported. It's going to be a story that's reported very, very well. I'm curious to see the timeline. I think the one thing I'd like investigated, once again, I don't know anything at this point, but the one thing I'd like investigated further is the fact that this happened after media days. This happened after the Ohio State game. It also happened after signing day. So I would like some clarification on when did the University of Michigan know about Sherrone Moore's indiscretions and when they took action. I think that's pretty crucial and very valid questions to ask. We have no information that says the contrary, that it didn't happen when they said, but it should be investigated due to those timelines and those dates. One thing I think is interesting is that a lot of what we talked about with Lane Kiffin and coaches at large this cycle is that loyalty and what it means now and how sad it is that coaches have to leave at certain points. The Sherrone Moore firing is very separate from that. In one way, it is a part of a very crazy college football landscape. I don't know if it speaks to anything in the sport at large. I don't think it has any tie-in other than an odd story. I mean, the big comp that's being made right now, it's ironic I work here now, but the big comp that's being made is Bobby Petrino at Arkansas, right? And so I don't really think there's any ties to what's going on in the sport writ large, besides the fact that, it's been a wild coaching carousel that appears to be getting more wild by the day with the Michigan situation. We'll see candidates, on 3 had a picture of Lincoln Riley. They had a picture of Brian Kelly. They had one of Kalen DeBoer. My thought is that, Sherrone Moore pays for the abortion in this, earlier on, and, they're able maybe to keep this quiet. But I have to believe, just because of life circumstances and whatnot, that it involved 2 staff members, and the way people talk in college football, I have to surmise that this had been known for a little bit of time, and that they had, there was some thought behind the scenes about when this occurred and how it happened. Once again, can't confirm that, but that'd be my inference. And that Michigan, being a school full of smart people that really do believe they are very, very smart people, have been thinking about this for I don't know how long, but they've had some time to think about what the next move is. So I'm sure some contacts have been made. This is not going to be a Penn State search. Obviously, the Michigan job is very valuable. It's a very good job. Jim Harbaugh won a championship. We have crowned only one national champion, ironically, Ohio State, since Michigan's won a championship. And they're in a very successful period, so it's a very coveted job. I expect that the financial investment in the program continues to be there for the Michigan Wolverine program. I don't think that will change. So they'll have, I'm not saying their pick of the litter, but, I think this is a very coveted job. Also, it being a job in the Big Ten, that's why DeBoer might jump, just because Alabama had a nice season, but there are folks out there who believe that Notre Dame should have made the playoff over Alabama. And so your path to a playoff appearance is much easier in the Big Ten than it is the SEC. If you listen to the show before, you know that I'm a big believer, a big advocate of the idea, hey, the SEC top to bottom is better. The Big Ten is just as good, if not better, at the top, right? They've had separate programs with national championships in a 2-year span. And Michigan, Notre Dame, Michigan and Ohio State rather have been up there. Indiana now is the number one seed, so it's the third program, number one seed. Last year, Penn State could have very easily been in the championship game, but you go past that to the Iowas and Oregon's on the rise too. But the second tier is not the second tier the SEC offers. Like, I would argue that Oklahoma, while they're in there, is a second tier team because their offense is dreadful to watch, and this is not like some just house of fire coming at you. With the Oklahoma team, they kind of just made it work this year, right? Like, they were clearly outclassed in the game where they played Texas. They had great wins along the way, but they were clearly outclassed, against Texas and more physically, and they hang their hat in their physicality, right? So it's like that if that's leading the second tier. Oklahoma, and then Ole Miss is probably number two, and we think they've got some flaws too. We'd all admit their team is not as good as last year's. But still very, very good programs. That second tier, they're still above what the Big Tens is, right? They're still hard teams to beat. There's still teams that the top teams will falter to in the end of the day. So they're not excellent teams, but they're better than that second weight class in the Big Ten, at least in my opinion. That's how I think. And I think part of maybe for the Big Ten, it's the travel factor in that as well. But still, I think top wise, Big Ten's better. Top to bottom, SEC is better. And so winning more games, I think, just comes easier in the Big Ten. Now the ACC might disproves that kind of notion idea, but those top Big Ten programs are a tab above, obviously, the top perceived ACC program. So it's a desirable job. We'll see where that leads. We'll have more coverage of that as it goes along. But the big takeaway here is that this is a Sherrone Moore problem. This is not a college football problem, right? You can argue the Lane Kiffin departure to LSU is more of a college ball calendar problem, despite Lane's personal issues or personal, personality, if you want to say that. You could argue that that's a reason why, but I think it's more about that stuff is more about like the state of college football and, Eric Morris, having to coach, John Summerall having to coach. I saw a meme the other day. It was, John Summerall's face with, the Florida hat on one side, the Tulane hat on the other, having to wear two hats at the same time, obviously is the metaphor there. And he's doing both, right? That's a calendar issue. And I also think the active coaching search, the activity of the coaching arena this year is due to the inactivity that we saw from a lot of schools last year. And so that's about that brought up, that to bear. I think the small details might be more related to a bigger problem writ large about the Sherrone Moore, but nothing that we can confirm. So at this point in time, it's a coach getting fired for very reasonable cause, in my estimation, at this moment. The second thing I want to break down, this is really what I want to make the show about, is the Utah agreement with the private equity firm. So we've heard about private equity getting involved in college football now for a while. We've heard about it with the Big 12 has floated that one for a while. We have heard that with North Carolina, obviously, their general manager, Mike Lombardi, going to Saudi Arabia, the ACC talking to Saudi Arabia about the Holiday Bowl. So that has been a point of contention, a talking point for a while. It turns out, the first school to make the jump is a school like Utah. It's more conservative state, in thought, but they are going to, stake this firm. This firm's going to stake them, I should say, with this money, and they're going to make their own LLC. So a for-profit wing run by the university that's just kind of out there as a business that'll handle licensing, that'll handle their branding and all those things. And so it brings upon those issues that we mentioned before, the actual stuff in college sports we want to talk about. So on the front for Utah, I think it's a good investment for them. I think the fact that they're a 10-2 team, they've been such a good program under Kyle Whittingham, shows that their ability to play towards the top tier of the sport. I think with the fickle nature of Whittingham's coaching status, where it's kind of almost a day-to-day thing or a year-to-year deal, if you will, I think colors the fact that, that this is a program that wants to stay a part of the top tier, a part of that conversation. And, ever since Urban Meyer, they've been a part of that conversation. They continue to be now, even in the Big 12. Right. And so I think that this big investment will help them. I think the one area where I really start to ask questions is athletic departments and college athletic departments spend all the money that they have. Now an athletic department has to manage the fact that they're getting outside funds, but they're going to owe some of that money back to a private equity firm in the end, right? This firm is going to invest. It's a capital firm, right? So they expect return on investment. And I think that for the private equity firm, the calculus is this, is that live sports are a very valuable property for TV stations. I mean, these grant of rights that they sign for colleges, they hand them off to the universities, and the universities end up making multi-year deals. The Big 12's contract runs through 2030, right? And then the next one will probably run for a while. I expect them to still have a nice TV contract, although not as big as the Big 10 or the SEC's. It'll be a pretty lucrative deal, when it comes to that time down the line. We've seen TNT, Turner, and I know there's a whole ordeal going on with Warner Brothers getting purchased and whatnot. But, I think these live sports rights continue to be a valuable property. And so you can expect between ticket sales and revenues from universities, a steady flow of income. So for a private equity firm, it makes a lot of sense that you invest in a college sports entity. It's very much like, a business investing in a pro sports team at this point in time, right? When groups take over professional sports teams, it's usually a conglomerate of private investors plus private equity, and they all kind of come together. They'll pick a front man, Magic Johnson, for example, to head up their purchase of the Dodgers or a piece of the Lakers or the Nets or whoever it is. NFL, not so much. Those are such valuable properties that, and you'll see some of that too. You'll see some of that as well. Walmart's a good example of that, but the Waltons rather, but i.e. Walmart, good example of that too. But I think this is probably a very solid investment. This is the, almost you put money in the bank and earn interest on it just because you expect it to be good. The bigger questions to me fall more on the college side of it, not on the private equity side. Private equity in multiple fashions, multiple firms have been probing college sports for an entry point for a while now, and I think rightfully so. The big question is that what does it all mean in the end? And look, I'm not no business major. I'm not in the business field, but as somebody who's covered the business of college sport now for a while, especially the conference realignment side of things, conferences wanted to gobble up as many valuable properties. SEC takes Texas and OU. The Big Ten takes Oregon and Washington, USC and UCLA, a prime example of them trying to get in the business of the business, right? You want to be in Los Angeles. You want to be with the Nike school. You be with Washington, a big program in that area, a natural rival to Oregon. It makes a lot of sense that, if the conferences are in the business of getting involved, why wouldn't investors want to be in the business of being involved? Because on a personal level, when it comes down to NIL, you see a lot of these folks who get involved, it's just about their own money. Troy Aikman, who is known to hold a grudge, talking about, hey, I'll never give money again because I never even got a thank you. Like, you have to understand fundamentally when you get involved in NIL, the return on investment is your happiness and your program doing well. ROI for a private equity firm is actual ROI. It's actual funds, and they'll be rooting for Utah wins, I'm sure. But in the end, Utah wins equal, Utah providing you dollars. And so that's what private equity sees in this. I'll be interested to see who makes the next move. Is it a conference? Is it a team? Is it a collection of teams? And I'm very fascinated to see if that is the case. And, it would take a lawyer, somebody who's involved in sports law to answer this question. But if those other groups I mentioned, more than one team were to get involved, what does it mean for the future of a sport that to me is very clearly headed towards, becoming a professional sports league, essentially? Never forget, the second most popular American sport by TV viewership is, in fact, college football. And so that's why folks want to get involved with that property. Saudi Arabia, obviously very much excluded in that conversation. So I think that's where I'm headed on that front, but good for Utah getting that cash infusion in a very tumultuous time, I would say, for the future of the program. Stability in terms of the current success, that's there. Utah is a stable, successful program with good players. They've continued to provide the NFL with plenty of talent. They recruit well in a variety of areas, and I think they want to keep up the image of the university regardless of what happens to Kyle Whittingham and his future. So I think that my eye is on who is the one to take the next step, because for Utah, it's a very logical move to take an influx of cash where you can. Then I'm also interested, the part where I'm interested to watch is Utah on the side of how do they manage this? What does it look like? Are we going to see administrative salaries increase? Because if that's the case, then I don't really have much interest in that. Coaching salaries, maybe, but coach contract lengths, I'll be watching that as well. So this, to me, actually asks more questions than it does answer anything. Like, the only answer here is, will private equity be involved in college football? The answer was it was always going to be. And we'll see how the Utah basketball program, if they do in fact benefit. I think you'd argue that's a big benefit for a lot of schools who are like that. The LSUs of the world, the Utahs of the world, who are obviously football first schools, but a cash inflection could really help them on the front of their different sports. How does that play out down the line? Other schools have that interest down the line as well. So I'm interested in that. All right, that will do it for today's show. Make sure you all leave your thoughts, your comments in the comment section. Like the video, sub to the channel. And if you can't watch us, find us wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcast and Spotify are the two preferred methods for most folks. So find us there. Give us a 5-star review if you could. That's always very much appreciated. All right, we'll be back with Jack Allen, who's texted me. We've got him. He's alive. He's well. So we'll catch up with Jack later on this week, hopefully.